effective and useful. So we appreciate it. All right, so we're going to get started here with Ms. Casey Elias, and take it away.
So what I was going to talk about was kind of more like a plant science lesson in middle school. I'm not in high school this year, but I taught middle school last year.
Casey, can you turn your mic up? I can't hardly hear you.
I think it's up. Is that better?
Not much. Just try to get as close as you can, I guess.
Okay. So what I was going to do was a plant science lesson, and anything that you can do with like hands-on with middle school worked out really well for me. So what I did was took Play-Doh and any like little things I could find in my classroom, and we did parts of a plant with it. So we kind of talked more about the different parts of a plant, and then we did like we put the different parts together. And went through like different pictures, so they would label the different parts that they could have for me. Just anything I could find in my classroom. We had string, straws, Play-Doh. I laid it out on a piece of paper, and they would label all the different ones. So these are just kind of some projects that they did. That's really all I had. Just more of a hands-on activity to do parts of the plant for plant science. I know you probably can't hear me very well.
All right, thank you, Casey. If you couldn't hear, what she did was she took various things like Play-Doh and many other things in her classroom and allowed the students to create flowers with parts on a piece of paper and learn that way. That's a really good lesson. I've seen that with all kinds of different projects, and that's a really good thing to do. That really helps the kids reinforce that knowledge of plant parts. All right, thank you, Casey. Does anybody have any particular questions about that, if they want to type that in the chat? Ashley Sepp says, I do this with candy. Yep. Do they get to eat it afterwards? Or is it edible once they get through handling it? Anything you find in your room, I got out for the kids to put together parts of a plant. And they labeled them, and I made that into a contest for the kids who make the best one. Yeah, they love contests. They love, middle schoolers especially love competitions. They'll fight you for a meat stick. Marshall Watkins says, I got some discounted live plants and we dissect them. That's good. Meg Dickerson said, I have paper flowers to use for Parts ID, works great around Mother's Day. Gifted afterwards. That's good too. Awesome. Awesome. If you got some more, keep going. I'm going to let Jackie go ahead and start. Jackie, if you will.
Hi, guys. So for my, I guess, mini lesson, I guess not really mini lesson because it took about a week to do. I love to argue, especially when it's with my kids. I think it builds character with them. So I figured that I would incorporate that with a lesson, especially with Parley Pro. I loved Parley Pro in high school, and I hadn't really dove into teaching it. So I really tried that out this semester, this last semester in the spring. I'm going to share my screen just so that y'all can see what my thought process was with this whole ordeal. So while I was thinking of doing the whole Parley Pro lesson, one of our 7th grade teachers was doing argumentative writing. I thought it was the perfect way to collaborate with them, and our school is huge on they're huge on cross-curriculum, collaborate with your teachers. So I think this is a perfect idea for that. So this Google Doc was just I got with our, one of our, oh goodness, I'm running a blank. They're called our, help me out, Dr. Parks. Is it our instruction, curriculum people? Yes, I'm sorry, I'm losing words.
Cultural support, maybe?
Yes. So I got with one of ours at our school. and she's super helpful. She helped because I've never really even thought about teaching any sort of writing class. So this was all new to me. So this was my thought process, like, where do I start? So we thought about like the nitty gritty. How do we even start presenting arguments to students? Because they love to argue, they love to voice their opinions, but we had to give them some sort of like structure to it. So what I did was I started with a bell ringer just to get them thinking, what's going on. And I'm gonna be honest, my PowerPoint slides are not very frilly, friffy, like they're not. So I gave them a bell ringer, like, what do you know about argumentative writing? Because I know they were learning about this during the last week in their other class. So I gave them that bell ringer just to see where we stood. And then I went around, sorry, I'm trying to get to my other screen. I went around and I just started seeing what students were writing down, started seeing what students were brainstorming. Once I saw what they knew, I kind of led the next discussion into a sample argument. And the sample argument could be as simple as like, which school has the better football program, Georgia or Florida? Super simple. That one's always a really good one to get kids riled up, because then you're gonna have the other ones is like, well, Penn State, da, da, da. So you're gonna have, that one's a really good one to get students geared into the right direction. So what I did was I got the blank class roster from Infinite Campus, and I put two columns, one for and one against. Circulated around the room. I would just quickly do a check mark. All right, this one's for, this one's against. And this would help me break the groups up, teaching them how to write proper debates, teaching them how to write proper arguments. That was helping me figure out, okay, this one's for, this one's against. They're both really, really good writers. Let me pair them up. Or this one's for, this one's against. They both struggle. They might need some help with somebody else. Just giving me like kind of a leeway where to go. Some other things through this document, I needed to see what was going to be a flawed argument, because though this was argumentative writing, what my end goal was that we actually incorporated ParleyPro into all this argumentative writing and actually did discussions with it. Didn't get to do that part because this was what we did on March 13th. So maybe next year, right? So this was just my quick, what do I do? Remind students how you speak in class. This was also a really good way to get students talking, get students collaborating with each other. This is a really good way to get students to realize, oh, that's probably not what I should say to my classmates. And how to start, so I just gave them a debatable question. They had to think to themselves, and they had to create a one-sentence claim, and they had to be prepared to share it with other students. This is where I walked around and just saw how students were writing, if they needed a little extra help. This was a lot of, they do the work, and I just walk around and see where they are. It was really, really great. This one's the kind that takes a lot of work at the beginning and a lot of the work behind the scenes, but while you're actually in the classroom, it's super, super just, they do it and you sit back. I actually had one of my APs come in the middle of this, and my students were arguing whether we were gonna buy 500 head of cattle for our ag department. And at the end of it, she was like, Mr. Vaughn says, we don't have the land. I'm like, whoa, no, this is all just a what if. It was pretty funny that she came in and she's like, whoa, they're making great arguments. Like, what in the world? I was like, yeah, I know, they're doing really good. But I mean, I shared this with Marcus, if y'all wanna look through it, just what I gave my students. Like I said, my PowerPoints aren't frou-frou, they're not frilly, but I kind of went through it, and I would give them things to make sure. I gave them my claim, like my personal claim, the Georgia Bulldogs have a better team. My reasonings, they have a better team because they beat Florida Gators this past year. Like I had to make sure I followed what their argumentative writing style was asking for. So they always have to have a claim. Their reasons always have to have the word because. It has to be factual. It has to be specific. It can't be opinion based. So things that you can things that you can prove. So yeah, they beat them last year. Then I would give them a your turn type of a thing. And the argument for one of them, what animal makes a better pet, cat or a dog? And at this point, I saw I saw their claims, I saw their reasonings behind the first one that I did about the Georgia Bulldogs and the Florida Gators. And that's whenever I partnered them up. I tried to do the ones that were for and against. I tried to do the ones that were for the Georgia Bulldogs and for the Florida Gators, the ones that had really, really strong arguments. I tried to pair them up together so that when they were in their groups, they could see, I think you need to have a better reason, or I think you need to add this. Because whenever they were in this step, what I asked for them to do was that look at their partner's evidence and how can you make their evidence better. And if they had any holes in their evidence, they needed to help each other fill them. So even though they were for and against each other, in a way, they still helped each other fill those holes. They had to think of those potential counter arguments and how to rebuttal them in a way. This part really, really helped having those strong arguments. And this is what I was really excited incorporating with Parley Pro, because this is where they actually got that meat in. Then I gave them another one. This is, 50 head, not 500 head. But I gave them an argument, and I gave them 2 minutes to write down a really, really strong claim. And then I gave them 7 minutes at the beginning to start writing reasons. And I thought it would be too long, but once we started walking around the room, I realized, okay, at the beginning, they might need the 7 minutes. They might need the full 7 minutes to write out the reasonings. Because I kept telling them, you need to make sure that everything everything is factual, specific, and non-opinion based. They're closer to the end of our lesson. They were closer to the meeting 5 minutes. So it gets easier. But again, this was probably my all-time favorite just lesson that I did, just because the kids were into it. We got to work with our 7th grade ELA group, and it was one that our admin got to see. So this was my favorite. If you'll have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer those. I know that was a lot, and I talk really fast.
That was great, Jackie. We got a lot of positive comments in the chat, and I will say that anytime that you can connect the career tech with the language arts and math and science and that cross-curricular stuff, the admin just eats it up. They love it. That's a good thing to do for sure. Plus, it gets your program, a lot more popular with the other teachers. When you take their FFA, your FFA members away from their class to go to a competition or whatever, they a little bit more lenient and tolerant of it too. So,
Paul, we got a question for Jackie. What grade level, Jackie, did you use this for?
So I use this with 7th grade. I think that it worked out perfectly because it was in their standards. I only teach 6th and 7th grade. The 8th grade goes over to the high school campus. Super, super strange situation. I would be nervous to try this with 6th graders, especially the first semester, just because it's so much content that they have to know already, especially about argumentative writing, that I would be nervous to try that. If anybody does, please let me know and let me know how that goes for you. But this one was with 7th grade.
Okay. Some good comments about from Maggie Reeves about putting them in groups, let them choose a topic. Great segue into Parley Pro. That's good. That's great. All right. Thank you so much, Jackie. Thank you very much. All right. If you got some more questions, you go ahead and post, and we're going to move on. Miss April Davis.
Hey there. I wanted to share something about Jackie's real quick. I wanted to type it in the chat box, but I didn't want people to think that I was doing something naughty. So if you go to the website flipthebirds.com, once upon a time, these people decided that they wanted to try to flip Georgia's state bird from the useless brown thrasher to the Cornish hen, since it does so much for our economy. And it kind of reminded me of that when Jackie was talking about that, because I actually used it one time for, we did like a great commodity debate. So everybody had their own commodity and they had to do like a campaign speech about why their commodity was the best. And it just kind of made me think about that. And again, I didn't know if I should type that in the chat without explaining it first. I don't mind typing it in there in a minute. But anyway, so it's called flipthebirds.com. They had like yard signs and koozies and all kinds of things made once upon a time. It was pretty awesome. But anyway, so if I had to talk about my favorite activity, it would be all about the ag market product sale, which is about what I did for Ideas Unlimited. But this year, I don't know if I'll be able to do that at all, since I usually have upwards of 100 people in my class when I do that. So instead, I was going to talk to you guys about just openers and how you do openers. Everybody's a little bit different. Maybe some of you don't do them at all. I don't know. But let's see what we got. Naturally, my dogs are going to start barking as soon as I start talking. But can you see my screen?
We can now. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So anywho, I give my students their own journal paper. And so it's got front and back 2 days or 2 weeks on one sheet of paper. I've just decided this is the easiest way for me to do it. I will no longer expect them to use their own paper because it's a hot mess trying to grade that thing. And speaking of grading, I don't really like grading stuff a lot of times. I don't know if it's okay to say that, but I just did. So anyway, grading is hard. So it took 14 years, but I finally decided on the very best way for me personally to grade daily journals. So I gave them this sheet so it's easy for them to write on. It's got all 5 days. At my school, we do learning targets instead of essential questions, but you can just make it whatever you want. But my daily journals, each day I do something specific. So on Mondays, we would do like Monday about me or motivational Monday. And so I would either put something FFA related, or I would put something that is like a motivational kind of quote, and they write one sentence about what it means to them. I've gone back and forth for a million years that I've been teaching on what I want them to do for their journal. Like, do I just want them to write down a sentence or a paragraph or do a math problem or whatever? And I finally just decided that we need to write down the learning target so they know what we did on that day. And they need to write down some kind of factual information, and then we can use it later. So I started the year with FFA stuff. So we have 2 area officers that are in the school system right next door to us. So I was like, how cool is that? Let's write their names down. On Tuesdays, I do Toolbox Tuesday. And so I take the list from vet science, wildlife, any CDE that you do that has some tools related to it. So like the junior ag mechanics you could use. But I tend to choose 2 things that relate to each other so we could talk about how they're alike, how they're different. I used to also not put the names up there and just put the pictures, but I got to thinking about it. What student would know what a hoof knife is? Like, nobody would ever guess that. And I want them to have a chance to actually be able to know that thing ahead of time. So anyway, I also do like a little spot for announcements too. So Toolbox Tuesday, I just choose 2 tools from the list that are similar, go from there. Wildlife Wednesday, pretty simple. I do anything from skulls to tracks. Sometimes we'll just use images, but I usually try to do ones that they can write down similarities and differences and kind of go from there. Thursday is the kids' favorite one because, as Walt mentioned before, they love a contest. And I've realized that middle schoolers do just about anything from one of those Kool-Aid pouches. But we do Term Find Thursday. And so I put this up here, there's a word search coming. Without shouting out, find as many words that you can related to FFA. So there are, as you can see, no word banks. So they just have to pick out words that relate to FFA and real words, of course. So that can be kind of interesting. But then I just show them at the end, what all was up there. For Fridays, we do Flower Friday, and we just use the floriculture list. Again, try to choose 2 that have similarities and differences so that you can compare them. And for these, I get them to draw a picture of it. But that's just kind of what I do. Now, as far as the grading is concerned, this is the part where it took me 14 years to figure this thing out. But I do a journal quiz twice a semester. So they collect all of their journal papers inside a folder. I keep a folder in my classroom for every child. And then whenever it's time for us to take the quiz, they can use anything that they have written down. And I just put 20 random images up there, and we just go through it, and they can use their notes. So that's how I grade them, just twice a semester, one and done, throw away those journals, and then do the rest of the semester journals. So that's what I got.
All right, April. Thank you very much. That's awesome.
You're welcome.
Just for myself too, class starters or wherever you want to call them, bell ringers, whatever. Everybody does them differently. If you don't mind, a few of y'all, if y'all just kind of, if you have like, I like the way she has a different topic or a subject for each day of the week. If anybody else does something different, what I've done in my class, this is ag mechanics, of course, but I just took the ag mechanics test from the state ag mechanics test questions and made them a question of the day. And so that way, at least all my kids are exposed to several of those questions throughout the year. And I do the same thing. I pick about maybe 3 times a 9 weeks is what I do it. About every 3rd week, I have a quiz, and it's a test grade. Like an easy 100, but many of them don't. CJ, you had something?
No, I just bumped my mute button.
10-4. All right, any questions for April?
Yeah, we do have a question from Skylar Alexander about how you get, overcome the issue of kids struggling to draw the whole "I'm not an artist" argument. That's an argument that I personally use. So
Yeah, that's actually the reason why I started doing 2 that are similar and alike. So that way I tell them, you can describe it. I don't care. But usually if they say, I'm not an artist, I always say, I'm not either. Oh my gosh, so you could do this instead. So the major thing is that they can be able to tell the differences anyway. So that's what I usually do. I always choose 2 that I can compare. And I saw Ashley Whitten's question. You can have that journal paper. You don't have to purchase it. But yeah.
Yeah, Dixie, I agree. I'm a terrible artist, so I draw too, and they don't feel so bad about themselves. Yeah, Amy Harrigan the same way. So yeah, hey, we're a lot of bad drawing ag teachers. How much time do you spend on warm-ups? Christy Deals wants to know.
Do you mean creating them or like each day? Probably each day.
Probably in class time.
I mean, yeah, so every day's a little, every day's a little different on middle school. I would say 5 minutes maybe. We have a weird bell situation sometimes, so I feel like kids are straggling in at times. So I use it as a time for, as soon as my bell does ring and it's time, we get started, and that way everybody that's coming in after is quiet and knows it's time to start. But yeah, I would say about 5 minutes. It's also a good time to go reiterate procedures and things they need structure. KCLIS, what was your topic again for Thursday? I do Term Find Thursday, so word search that doesn't have word banks.
And Harley Garcia stamps them, and that's good. Like a like from Facebook, that's good. That's a good way to grade. Yep. I do roll too, Connor. That's when I do roll as well as myself. It gives me time to do that, and so they're not sitting there looking at each other and getting in trouble. I only have 35 minutes with my kids. Wow, that's quick. My goodness. What do you do if a student is absent?
I tell them to get it from their friend. I reiterate every week that don't forget our journal quiz is going to be this day. You need to write down these things. If you weren't here, get it from your friends. And I can tell you that has been the biggest struggle on what to do with the journals, because when I would just try to grade them each week or every 2 weeks or whatever, then the kid would have to tell you if they were absent and whatever. So I used to just get them to write absent across it so I would know, but that's not fair in the quiz scenario. So now that we do a quiz, they just know you get it, you get it. You don't, you don't. So got to get it from somebody.
All right. Thank you very much, April. That was very good. I think that's very useful for folks, veterans and new ones alike.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Whidden, if you want to take the stage, go ahead.
Okay, so there are a lot more people in this chat or Zoom meeting that are a lot more experienced than me and have a lot better ideas. So If you have something that you need to say, just put it in the chat box. Probably something I hadn't thought about. I'm going to try to share my screen with you guys. I was asked to speak on curriculum, but I'm actually going to talk about a lesson that we do and then something extra that kind of ties into April's stuff a little bit. So we were sitting around at Colt one year, a group of teachers from my county, and trying to figure out how to not have to talk so much and say the same stuff over and over and over and over again. Because, you know, middle school kids, you can say it 5 or 6 times and they still don't understand it. So instead of saying something over and over and over again, I had this crazy idea that I would just create Snapchats and I would put them in my PowerPoints to discuss like yearly procedures or daily procedures, what I expect from them, and all that jazz, if you will. So I'm going to try to share my screen and show you kind of what I do real quick. Let's see. Okay. So this is just the beginning PowerPoint that I show, and like it, you can see here that this is just the beginning for my 8th grade. And if I'm gonna scroll down to the bottom, you can kind of see that I have year-long 6th and 7th grade because they're totally different. But this is my generic 8th grade class, not my set year-long class. So this is what I play for them to start the year off, so I don't have to say it so many times.
We can't hear the video volume on there.
I don't know how to share that. Can anybody tell me how to share that? Well, you don't have to hear it. It's probably better that you don't hear it because, you know, you can just see how it is. But I'll go through and I'll tell them a little bit about me. But this one is what really freaks people out because it sounds like a man filter. And so they really kind of get that. And I'm one that loves to laugh at myself. I think the more that I laugh at myself, the more they take me a little. We're all different teachers, you know, we're not supposed to be your standard teacher. So if I can break it up through the day or whatever, then that helps out. But the next slide, so I tell them about FFA and stuff like that, but the next slide really is where it kind of ties into April's thing. I have them set up their question of the day or whatever, and I show them how to do it. And I tell them year after year the same thing over and over and over again. I'm just sick of it. So I just started doing Snapchat videos so I could explain it to them. And then I have them recall it with me. Like I'll say it, okay, guys, let's say it together. And it's actually in my Snapchat video. So I don't have to say it all the time, all day for the first couple of days. They remember that video and the different funky filters that we're doing. And it kind of helps them just engage a little bit more, kind of break up the monotony, and you know, really just see that we are different people and we're supposed to be that different teacher. And I think I got that when I was teaching in high school, that if I could just somehow connect with the kids, that I wouldn't have as many behavior issues. And I found that through these things, because the kids love Snapchat, and I've gotten into the TikTok thing, so I'll dance with them now. And like our officer recruitment video this year has a TikTok video in it. I think that they see that we are a little different. It also helps with recruitment, I feel like. Again, I have it through for all of them, for all the all the different grades and classes that I teach. Let me see if I can share my screen, a different screen. Okay. The actual lesson that I wanted to kind of talk to you guys about is I teach PVC pipe tutors. You know, I don't know how it is in your school, but I feel like if I use the word shooter where I'm at, they might get a little upset. So I change it to marshmallow tutors. But the kids really know that it's just a marshmallow shooter. And I'm sure that you guys do this in your class because this is a super easy project to do. It's very inexpensive, and it's our capstone project actually. So I use the one less thing lesson plans with the measuring, how to read a ruler, And I think with this specific class that I'm going to show you some pictures on, I did the Georgia PVC pipe activity, but with my other classes that I used it on, I didn't. And I found, for the researcher in me, I found no difference in how the students actually performed or did the skill or whatever. But with this, the kids are responsible, in the next slide, the kids are responsible for the mathematics of it. So you can kind of see in the first picture right here that it says 31-8 inches equals 21 feet of pipe. So I had 31 kids in the class, and we needed 8-inch pieces according to the previous slide. How many 8-inch pieces did we need? And then, you know, you multiply that times 31 and it gives you the feet of pipe. So this was us trying to, I make them do it from conception all the way to finalization of the project. So how much material do I have to go buy? And so I made them calculate the material. That's not my job, that's their job. If they want to participate, they got to figure out the material. I got too much to do. So I say it just like that to them. I make them understand that they are required to figure out the material. And of course I do it with them on the board and make sure that it's correct. And if it's wrong, then we fix it. But yeah, make them figure out the material of how many overall feet of pipe that I need. And then I bring it and I have them figure out, I bring it and then I make them get into groups. And once they get into groups, I have them determine, I think it's 14 inches of pipe per person. And so, you know, however many people are in the group times 14 inches. And really it's 13.5, but I try to give them an extra half-inch leeway because they're middle school kids. They're going to cut wrong. And they're going to cut at an angle. And that was something I wasn't prepared for the first time I did it. They're not cutting straight. They were cutting it on like a beveled edge, which is kind of weird. So you have to account for mess ups, obviously, with this kind of project. But I'd have them figure out total length of what they needed. I would cut them a stick using a pipe cutter, not a hacksaw, because it's so much easier. And then I'd say, okay, go to town, and have them directions on the board and stuff. And this is not what I use to teach with. I just hate to say it like this, but I just kind of, the way that my classroom was set up is I had enough board and a smart board to be able to write it and do it with them. So I didn't create a document. I didn't create a PowerPoint. I didn't do any of that kind of stuff. I gave them the picture and I said, let's do it. So you can see the little girl here in this picture. She's sanding down her PVC pipe so that she could use it. I think that's probably the 2-inch piece. But here you can see that the kids are in different groups. They are working out of a box. And I think with middle school kids, it's super important, and I had to learn this the hard way, that you give them all the materials in one confined box. That way they have an accountability for the box. Like everything they need is in the box. So you can see there's a hacksaw, there's a speed square, there is a Sharpie marker, and there was PVC, there was sandpaper. Everything that they needed for their project was in that box. And again, for any project with middle school kids, I think it's important that you have a box for them to be able to look at. And they're working together. You can see I got one person, because it was all about safety. We're not wearing safety glasses or anything because, well, I didn't feel like it was necessary. But I have one kid holding the end of the pipe on the table, one kid holding the pipe, you know, as the other kid cuts it, and then a kid cutting it, even though he needs to tuck his thumb. Sorry, that's probably not a good picture of that. And then another kid supervising. So I tried to give each one of them a role. This is an example of how they customized it. So the 3 pieces that they cut, they were able to customize, and I would give them the T and I'd give them the end cap, but they weren't allowed to customize that because I would have them break it down and just cut costs, because my FFA budget paid for all of it. Because, you know, we're all middle school. We don't really get the Perkins fundings that we probably need, but my FFA chapter would pay for it. So I would buy T's and end caps and make them break it down so the other classes could use it. But they would use spray paint. They wound up using duct tape as well. And that was really cool. But we went outside and we had like a big day of it. And you can see the circles on the ground. The kids were just having a good time. We figured out that when they put it on their finger and they spray painted it that way, that they were able to get all sides, and they got a little dirty and they appreciated that. what I did not account for was actually having to teach middle school kids how to spray paint. I didn't realize, because this is the first time I'd really done it. You can't spray in a spot. You have to spray back and, kind of go with it. But that was interesting. And then I had some kids who knew how to do it. So they were my teaching assistants, and that was really neat. And then finally, here, I'm going to play this video, and I'd have them all set up together, and I would do a slow-mo video because they love this kind of stuff. So here it is. And so they just really loved it. They thought it was really cool. And that kind of opened up our banquet. It was kind of neat. That was the 8th grade class at the time. And having marshmallows shot in the face of the camera opened up the banquet. And down here, you can see this last picture. I had to put that in there because it got in my hair and they were slimy. So that was interesting. It was gross. That's why I looked like that, but it was really, really fun. Again, this was like a capstone project for us. This was during Georgia Milestones, so it was super fun and creative. It got them out. I had a little more time because of the schedule, but it was a very inexpensive project. The kids really got into it. You see that they have a bag, and they have marshmallows. The kids were responsible for bringing mini marshmallows and a plastic bag so they could put their marshmallow tutor in it, and I would call it the marshmallow tutor activity. And the thing that we also have to remember is once the marshmallows fall on the ground, they can't use them, not because it's gross, but because they're sticky and they'll stick inside the pipe, and it won't come out. So I had them break them down after we got done, and I would keep the teas and I would keep the end caps, and then sometimes they won't come off though. Like you can see this kid has a red tea. He brought his own so he could keep it. But primarily this activity was really cool because the kids, I put them up against each other and they were able to have like a marshmallow war, which was kind of neat. It was just a good activity to get them outside, but also put in, I guess, those STEM information like mathematics and hands-on and the science behind it. If I was really good, I would want to see the trajectory of the marshmallows at the speed and all that kind of good stuff, but we didn't. It was Georgia Milestone, so we didn't get into it. But that was our activity, and I try to do it every year in the spring because I have these kids I had all year long, but I try to do it in the spring because it's just a really great activity. But obviously I couldn't do it this year. So that's all I had. If y'all have some questions, let me know. All
right, a couple of questions. Somebody suggests doing that at a meeting and treat it like paintball. That'd be a good activity. Somebody asked, were you able to do one per kid?
Yeah, I was able to do one per kid, but I see Brandon put on here that it was $100 per class. It didn't cost me near that much. I don't know why. And we already had the hacksaws and the sandpaper and stuff, but I don't remember. It didn't cost me. It didn't cost me a fraction of that. I don't know why. Each kid had their own and was able to take it home. Again, I kept the teas and the end caps because I think that was the most expensive part, but I bought extra in case they got stuck because a couple of them did get stuck. And there's a bunch of PVC pipe tutorials on YouTube, but they are like the crazy ones with the top that you use, and it had a lot more PVC and a lot more detailed makings, if you will. I thought that the simpler one would be cheaper, and it was, and easier to do.
And Kevin Jump posted a video about making sprinklers with PVC as well. And Melanie Tucker does it. Go ahead.
Somebody asked me about how long it took. It took me about a week to do because I'm on a 45-minute schedule. Yeah, 45-minute schedule. I'm not on a 9-week schedule. Again, I'm on a semester, but it still took me about 45 minutes to do. But again, it was from conception to end. You could probably break it down quicker than that. I think actual construction was about 3 days.
All right. I did this in my class too when I taught 8th grade. They loved it. We got done in about 2 days. I actually made them glue clean and glue a couple of the joints for, to show them teach them how to do that. You definitely don't want to glue on the cap at the bottom because you can't clean it out when they get nasty, slimy marshmallows in there. And we did a little top shot activity at the very end as our capstone to the capstone project. And I put index cards and folded them in half and laid them on a sawhorse. And they got back and they went in groups of 3, and whoever got it first moved on to the next round. And that was kind of fun. They enjoyed that.
That's neat.
All right, we're going to move on. We're getting close to running out of time. That's a great project. Thank you, Ashley. And Mr. Timothy Holman, if you'll go ahead and take it away.
All right, give me 1 minute to share my screen, and then let's see. All right, so this is can y'all hear me good?
Yes, sir. We're good. Go ahead.
Okay. So this is a school garden we do. I know everyone does gardens differently at their schools, but with ours is like a community service project our 8th graders do. But you can do this with any of the 3 grades, since all 3 grades do have plant science standards. I wanted to show you all that just to remind everybody. But our school garden, it's planned and maintained by the 8th grade students. They have an input of what will be planted. We sit down and we plan before we ever go outside. I break them into groups, and they decide if they want to plant tomatoes, for example, or squash or whatever. And then we harvest and donate anything we produce to this organization in the county called Walton Wellness. They provide fresh produce to people in the community. And our garden work days during the school day include pulling weeds, watering, planting, harvesting, etc. It's a really good project for class. It's a good community service project. It's a good activity you could put on your national chapter if you want. It has a lot of applications you can use. And this is when we sit down and plan, like I said, I break them up into groups and they decide what they're going to plant. We have a little chart that we hang up by the greenhouse. That way they know which raised bed is theirs, what they have planted in case they forgot, when we'll probably be able to harvest. Just that way they know, I know, and we stay organized. This is what our school garden looks like. I mean, it's nothing fancy. As you can see, based on this picture I had before, we have a lot more raised beds than we did the beginning of this past school year, because we applied for a Living to Serve grant, which I'm going to talk about later also. But my recommendation is find a organization in your community, a food bank or a nonprofit that would be willing to work with you. Because when you have the kids invested not only in what they're planting, but also they know people in the community that could use this produce, whether it's their neighbor, maybe a family member, a friend, whoever. They know people that could benefit from this. So find a organization like a local food bank, church food bank. I did a quick search yesterday of a county next to me that they have some nonprofits in their community too that they could possibly work with. And like Walton Wellness is just the one we partnered with. They have this mobile pharmacy, which is a bus that goes around to 3 areas in the county, Social Circle, Monroe, and Walnut Grove. And they give out fresh produce, like I said. This is just some pictures of what it looks like. And then these are pictures of my students actually working. And I chose some of these photos because some of the kids in these photos, they were ones that don't like to do their classwork when they're sitting in here actually doing stuff. But then you can see they're all engaged, they're all willing. Some of them even have smiles on their faces as they're working. And it's just a really interesting experience to see what they've learned, possibly reluctantly from 6th and 7th grade, and then actually applying it outside to actually produce stuff for their friends, community members, things like that. And then during the summer, we have garden work days, and these help keep our members and even some other students that aren't FFA members involved. We had a few that would volunteer. It's a good way for summer SAE hours to be earned. And then this photo right here in front of me, this was my officer team right before we did our Colt. We actually did a garden work day, harvested a couple buckets and trays of produce, and actually donated it that day also, before we went to Colt. And then I have some advice based on what we just learned. Start that relationship early before you start planning all your raised bed stuff, because the nonprofit or food bank, whoever you partner with, they might have some expectations. Like, for example, they prefer us not to use pesticides on our stuff, and that's fine with me because I don't have to worry about spraying around kids, and also there's more weeds that pop up, and it makes it where I have more work for my kids. I would recommend break students into small groups and assign each group a raised bed. It helps you keep track of who's doing work and who's not. And then have some raised beds assigned for the whole class, because you'll have some kids that they might finish their work day early. They might not have had a lot of weeds in their raised bed, or they might not have had a whole lot of stuff to harvest. But if you have some raised beds assigned to the whole class, then those kids that finish early can move on and not have to worry about just standing around for 10, 15 minutes with nothing to do. And I learned this past summer. Variety is good in your raised bed gardens. Kids like to see different stuff. But if you're going to be donating it, you need to have less variety so you have more quantity. We had issues with not having a whole lot of quantity of, let's say, cucumbers to donate at once. And that's kind of hard to then spread out around the community if you only can harvest 5 cucumbers at a time because you have 30 different crops growing. Make sure your kids understand that during the school year, they're not going to be outside every day, even though they are excited about going out. You have factors such as rain, cold weather, things like that play into that. They might not have anything to do that day either. If they just pulled weeds the day before, you have no reason to go outside and have a garden work day. So I had some kids saying several days in a row when it got cold in the wintertime, are we going outside today? Are we going outside today? And I'm like, no, y'all, it's 30 degrees. You're not even wearing pants right now. You're wearing gym shorts, but we're not going outside today. Adding pollinator plants around the garden does attract more pollinators, and I'll show y'all one thing we did. These cinder block raised beds that you can see in this top photo, we've actually filled those holes in with soil, and we planted flower seeds in there like zinnias and other type of flowers. That way we had more pollinator plants around our garden. That way we didn't have to devote raised beds specifically to those flowers, but we still had more pollinator plants for bees, flies, whatever, to be attracted to. And then if you're worried about funding for starting something like this, apply for a Living to Serve grant. I know middle school programs don't get as much funding as high school most of the time, depending on what your community has. Your nonprofit organization might be able to help you get some donations. We actually had 6 raised beds donated to us when we first started, but Living to Serve grant is how we got 40 whiskey barrel planters, 10 raised beds, 2 whole pallets of soil, and several other things to grow our garden, how much we could produce. There's 3 different kinds of Living to Serve grants. You have your year-long ones that are $3,000, your semester-long, which are spring or fall, for $1,200, and your day of service, which are $400 grants. And there are 4 focus areas. When I applied for mine, we did the hunger, health, and nutrition. This was the best category for ours to fall under. And I will say, these are the deadlines for this year for Living to Serve grants. The grant process is not that bad. We completed ours, and they had one question about it. So they actually set up a time for me to talk to somebody. And at first, instead of just saying, no, you're not getting this grant because you didn't explain something good enough, I was actually able to explain something to them, which got us our grant for the year and helped us, which I think is pretty great, because we all are busy. We might forget something in our application. If they want clarification, that helps us versus just being told flat out no. And if y'all want any help with these Living to Serve grants, like I said, I got one for the raised beds, but I've also gotten one for recycling bins in the school. I'm not a great grant writer by any means, but if you need help with them, I'd be more than happy to help y'all out any way I can. And that's all I really had. Like I said, we donated our stuff. It's a great project for our kids. It helps them see how plants actually grow, get some hands-on experience, but also they are more invested in it because it does help people in our community. So that's all I got. If y'all have any questions, we can pop it up. Let me see how to go back. Stop share.
All right, that was great, Timothy. A lot of people, several people posted that they do something similar. And this is a great project. I really like the idea of using the cinder blocks and putting the pollinators in those. That's a really great idea. Some give, do the farm to school. I know there's a lot of folks that do that as well. They use their raised beds in the school system.
And we actually do that too. So during the wintertime, our organization doesn't do as much. After, I think it's about September, they don't do as much of the mobile pharmacy. But what we did was we put radishes and a few things like that we grew from our cool season vegetables into the cafeteria as well. That way the kids were still able to do some of that during the year.
All right. Awesome. If you have any more questions for Timothy, you can put those in the chat. We're going to move on. Miss Ashley Thompson.
Okay. Let's see. Just click the share screen button. Is that all you do? Okay, hopefully that worked. Okay, so if you look at the Ag Teacher Share Drive and go to the middle school folder, I added a Journey 2050 folder. One thing that I was really concerned about after we've had our back to school Zoom meetings is they're kind of really encouraging us to just limit the kids to the Chromebooks, I guess, because they think that's more sanitary than using manipulatives, which is kind of sad being a middle school teacher. But so I posted my Journey 2050 file that I used, and you're going to see a lot of the stuff that's just on the website, and of course I didn't make that, but I did make note sheets to use, tests. There's a test for your regular kids, there's a test for your sped kids, there's some different worksheets and stuff that I've made to go along with it, and I've made a copy of it so you're not going to mess me up or anything. They do have some good worksheets that come with the curriculum that you can download as well. But I hope that would help people that either go in virtual or their school system's highly encouraging them not to use a lot of manipulatives, especially first 9 weeks. And then the other thing I wanted to show was something that has gotten me out of the hole many times. If I'm just kind of having a blah day, or the day is off, because we get our times cut out all the time for assemblies, or the kids go to do whatever. Ag Explore has these virtual field trips, and there's I think like 5 or 6 of them. If you never used these before, they last about 45 minutes, which is terrific because that will get you through a whole class period. And if you get cut out of time or even want to use it to reinforce, or you have half your kids because the other half are somewhere, you can whip one of these out, pass out a sticky note to everybody, and that'd be their ticket out the door, and you can have them write down some things that they learned or questions that they have, or 5 new things they learned. I was talking to one of my favorite people in the world, Caroline Williams, the other day, and I was telling her, don't forget about simple things like teaching vocabulary. These kids don't know a lot of vocabulary, at least in my experience. So we do a lot of drawing. I tell them to fold a piece of paper into 8 squares, and they draw out concepts so that I know that they understand what it is. And that's really good for some of my lower special ed students because they can't do a lot of writing or they can't spell. And so if I can tell them, can you draw what this looks like or what you think this means, then I can kind of gauge their understanding. So index cards, paper, sticky notes, things that you have in abundance in your classroom, don't forget those are really good methods to use. Another thing that I use for virtual stuff is the discussion questions on Google Classroom. So if you need a filler or you need to check for understanding or maybe make it more relevant, you could post an article of a current event that relates to what you're doing and have them answer in that discussion platform. And you can set it where only you can look at it, or you can set it where they can read each other's responses or go back and change their answers. And sometimes I'll do those for daily grades as well, depending on the time allotted. But again, nothing magical, but just some ideas that I have used and kind of plan to use as we move forward this school year.
Okay, Ashley, thank you. I didn't know about those virtual field trips. That's good. I might use those as well. Just FYI on your on the ag teacher share, I just checked it. You have that as a shortcut to your files, but it's not accessible to everybody else.
I didn't really know how to do that, so I was trying to.
The easiest way I found to copy a whole folder is download it and then go where you want to put it and upload it.
Okay.
If you're just doing one file, it's easy, but multiple files, that's the easiest way to do it.
Okay, I will fix that. Thank you so much.
Any questions for Ashley? If you have them, just put them in the chat. We're gonna go a little bit longer today than we have been because we have so many presenters and we've got such great information and everybody's engaged. We're gonna take maybe 5, maybe 10 minutes because my system's actually meeting as we speak about what they're going to do with going back to school and virtual and all that good stuff. So we inevitably, most of us are going to have to deal with doing something virtual. So if we take a few minutes here and let people share maybe some ideas you have about developing and delivering lessons in a virtual setting. While somebody's volunteering on that one, just type, just put maybe a few words in the chat and I'll recognize you. Brock wanted to know about the simplest way to download a whole folder. You just go to the folder you want to download in Google Drive. You hit Control-A on a Windows. I don't know what to do on Mac. It's one of them little symbols on your keyboard. And it copies, it selects everything, and then just right-click and say Download. And that downloads the entire folder as a zip file. You can unzip it and then upload the whole folder to another place. That's the best way I found. And I did want to mention something about Journey 2050. That is an app on the iPhone and on Android. I think it's called Farmers 2050, if I'm not mistaken. And it's a game that kids can play. I've seen it. I've not used it. My little son has played it before. He liked it. I've never integrated it into class, but I think it would be very appropriate for middle school. And there's a lot of lesson plans available for that. So check that out too. Yeah, if somebody, Marcus posted the ag teacher share, just email Katrina Pollard, pollard.katrina@newtonk12.ga.us, and they can get access. CJ Pinson said I made silly videos of what I was doing to keep kids engaged and entertained. I'm actually thinking about doing some Snapchat. I hate Snapchat, but I might actually use some filters and record some videos myself. Dixie, would you like to talk just briefly about what you do with 2050, if you don't mind?
Okay. So what I do with 2050 is it's more for supplemental, like when we were talking about the schedules getting messed up and we either have time or we don't have time. And so what we do is they have to decide together, like we do it on the smart board, and they have to decide together what to buy and where they need to put the fertilizer and problem solve together as teams. And it really builds a lot in you can tell the kids are paying attention because they will go further with it than the others. And then I also use this, I do champs with 5th grade because 5th grade's in our building. And when the sheriff's officer can't be there, I teach them something. So a lot of times we'll do this, and then that's almost a recruitment tool for 6th grade when they get to me, because I'll sort of see some of the things that we do, but I make sure it's a fun activity. And we've taken it further, depending on what the class is doing. We may go in there and we've talked about fertilizer and what you should plant and, rotating crops for different things. And then we'll go into the game and they'll understand what that game means a little bit more, and they can go further and go up more levels. So it's real flexible, but I really do like it. And I had a lot of kids that were doing it at home because I put the link on Google Classroom, and they were doing it at home and would come in telling me that they had beat my score because I played it so that they could beat my score. So we did do a lot of that.
That's awesome. Good deal. LaDonna posted, that's a really great idea. Kids that have no idea about SAE, she delivered a kit that had seed, soil, and containers. Would you mind telling us what kind of containers that you delivered to them?
I kind of took that idea from Dr. Flanders. I did like cereal bowls and just poke holes in the bottom of it so that you have drainage. But you can do it like with flower pots that you already have, or you can be creative. For most of my kids, I know that they don't have the resources to buy stuff. So I just kind of use whatever I have. And then the seeds, you can get like the Dollar Tree seeds, or you can go to a feed store and get seeds. And just give them everything, tell them what to do. On a video, you can do a class where you just kind of basically show them what they're supposed to be doing, because they will plant the seeds any type of way. So you want to let them know like how far down to plant whatever seed that they have based on the size of the seed. And excuse me, and then you gotta just go from there, and then use Flipgrid to see the process. And Flipgrid is really good. I actually used that when we went remote just recently, and we talked about, it was an article I think that was posted from the share about how coronavirus affected the vegetable industry. And so I had them, like we read it together in class, and then I gave them like a little scenario of what they would do if they were the farmers in that situation. But as far as the delivery, yes, I actually drive to deliver, because if I try to actually mail out all of that stuff, it's not a guarantee that the kid lives at that specific location. So it takes a lot, but I think that it's a pretty good idea.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I actually, that's the article you talked about. I used the same one on virtual. I put it on my Google Classroom and then had them write a response to that article.
Yeah, so I did the same thing. And actually, my Flipgrids, I got some like really, really good videos from my students. Like they were like super engaged, and I think that they actually like really, I guess, felt whatever that article was talking about. So it was really good.
Okay. All right. Good deal. So Jackie talked about using Gym Kit, Kahoot quizzes is and all that stuff. I'm not familiar with. I'm familiar with Kahoot and Quiz but not Gym Kit.
GameKit is super similar to those. It's I think you have to pay for a subscription, but it gives you up to like 6 quizzes you can do for free, and it's another one of those like what you call it, like Kahoot, where you can do the quizzes and whatnot. But instead of points, it gives them money, and you can switch it to where they play against each other, they play as a group. They love anything with money, so super great. Would recommend it. There's a lot of FFA stuff on there, and you can look up quizzes and add your own, like add questions to your own without having to type everything up. So it's super time saving. Love it. Would recommend.
Okay, cool. All right.
Yeah, I got
Okay.
a private message. There's an amazing Facebook page called Bitmoji Craze for educators, where there are tons of virtual classroom platforms already created and shared as templates. And this person plans to use those platforms in their classroom, whether virtual or in person. So good stuff there.